human that, heart to heart, belly to belly conversation is just so valuable.
I love that, belly to belly. That's fantastic. Yes, it was like being inside of this interesting planet
Yeah.
populated by Amazonians.
Guys, I am super excited for this next guest. I can't wait for you to meet Lorenza Muñoz. Lorenza and I met through Carol Costello, who you may recall, former CNN anchor, now a professor of journalism. She and Lorenza are good friends, and she said, Steve, you two just have to meet. You guys will get along great. And boy, was she right. We are so simpatico on so many levels about the power of community, building connections, and making a difference in this world. You've just got to hear Lorenza's story and how she was influenced by her great aunt and her grandmother, people that taught her the meaning of connecting and seeing other people for what they're worth and bringing people together to actually make a huge difference for their community. She's now doing that through Artemis Muse Productions. And when you hear her story, from being a journalist to working at the Oscars to moving to Amazon MGM Studios and now to her own enterprise, her own firm, you are going to be blown away. This woman is a doer. She is a community shaper and someone that I can't wait for you to meet. So let's dive right in. Welcome to the Ripple Effect Podcast. How are you doing?
I'm great. Thank you, Steve. Thank you for having me.
I can't begin to tell you how excited I am to have you on the podcast. I mean, I mentioned in the intro that I think we are simpatico on so many levels. When you sent me the write-up and I'm like, oh my gosh, I mean, were we separated at birth or what's the deal here? Because we have similar attitudes and mindsets, and I can't wait to dive into this. But before we go into too much, I'd love to give you just an opportunity to share a little bit with my audience about who you are, a little bit about your origin story, because it's fascinating.
Origin story going all the way back, or
however far back you want to go. I mean, you are incredibly interesting, so you can start wherever you want.
Great. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. So I moved to this country from Mexico City when I was 6 years old. My parents came really because they just wanted an adventure. Like, we had a very good life in Mexico, and they were like, let's see if there's something on the other side.
Yeah.
In part, it was related to my mom wanting us to have a more, we were getting sick a lot in Mexico City because of the pollution. And so she came to Virginia. She brought us to a camp in Virginia and fell in love with the United States. So we moved here, and I grew up in Orange County. I was a swimmer for a very long time. I swam with the Mission Vieja Nadadores, which were an amazing swim team. And then I went to Berkeley, and then I came back and I was a journalist at the Los Angeles Times for many, many years. And I covered everything. Back in the day, they used to make you cover the cops and courts and politics and elections and all kinds of things. And then I also covered entertainment. And that was really where I kind of found a really fun niche, that, where I got to speak to artists, I got to know the artists. It was arts, it was entertainment, it was film, and it was a great beat. And then after that, I fast forward a few years, I had a few kids, got married, the whole thing. And then I went to the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, which is the organization that gives out the Oscars. And I worked there for, it was almost 6 years. And it was during a time that was very challenging and fun, where we had the Oscar So White controversy.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Sorry, my dog.
No problem.
Yes, the Oscar So White controversy. And so we had to really quickly mobilize so that the academy would not be basically canceled. We
Yeah.
were at a point where the Oscars were almost going to be canceled because people didn't want to participate in an organization that didn't feel very inclusive.
Sure.
So we came up with a plan and we implemented it. We doubled the number of women and underrepresented groups and international folks within the 4 years, which is what we had intended. And as a result, the Academy did become more inclusive. And, it's still an exclusive club, but it's not exclusionary, or at least it
Yeah.
doesn't feel as exclusionary. And then I left the academy after we achieved all those goals. I left and I went into Amazon MGM Studios and was doing talent and industry relations for them for almost 4 years. And then in January, I launched my own company, Artemis Muse Productions.
Wow. Okay. So I got to ask, I mean, going back to being a reporter for the LA Times, how do you make that leap to the Academy? What was it that said, hey, I've done the journalist thing, I'm ready to try something different? Or was there, what was the bit of inspiration there to make that leap?
Well, so to be honest, it wasn't a leap from the LA Times to the Academy. It was a
Okay.
leap from the LA Times to being a full-time mommy.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah. The
It
most
was
important role there is to have out there,
Yes,
right?
I had two kids, and when I was at the paper, I was spending so much time working and
Yeah.
more time with my computer than with my kids.
Yeah.
And so I thought, this is silly. Like, why did I have children if I'm not going to see them?
Yeah.
And so I stopped working full time and spent 4 years at home with them. I was still writing freelance and still keeping, I started writing a novel, etc. But the primary change was focusing on the kids. And then after 4 years, I was like, okay, that's enough. I need to get back out there. And the kids seemed fine. And so I went back to work and I did some work at LA County doing communications for them.
Okay.
Um, but I kept in touch. To answer your question, I kept in touch with the CEO of the Academy because I had met her back when I was a reporter and I was covering independent film. She was the head of an organization that was spearheading, independent film and the Spirit Awards, etc. And we kept in touch. We would have lunch every March. So every year for 3 years, we had lunch right after the Oscars. And it was leading up into the Oscar So White controversy. So
Yeah.
this was around 2012, 2011, something like that. And the CEO was having issues because the Academy was not inclusive. It was very closed off. Um, some would argue it was on the verge of becoming almost irrelevant.
Yeah.
And and so we would have lunch and I would give her counsel. She would ask my advice on how to reach out to certain folks in underrepresented groups or strategy. And after 3 years, she was like, well, there's an opening and I'd love for you to consider it. So that's how I got to the Academy.
Well, so for my audience, that's a huge lesson though, right? Because you had a connection when you were working at LA Times, right? But you've continued to foster that and look
Yeah.
what it provided for you, right? I always
Yeah.
tell people all the time, you never know where a connection might lead, but if you don't continue to pursue it or try to build a relationship with that person, leads nowhere. But clearly you did a good job, keeping that relationship, a priority and continuing to cultivate it and grow it. And then it manifested in an opportunity. I think that's great.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's one of at Amazon they like to say superpowers.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That I think is one of my superpowers is keeping in touch with people and keeping close relationships with people that I'm simpatico with or that are just fulfilling either intellectually or spiritually or emotionally, but keeping in touch is a really important part of how I like to do things.
I love that. I love the word that you used, simpatico, because I used it in our intro. Because you and I just feel like we are so simpatico in terms of what we do and how we do it and the approach.
Yeah.
And obviously, is that something? And we're going to get into kind of what you're doing today, but and I've got the benefit of knowing a little bit about your background and what you learned from your family, your grandmother and aunt, and sort of what you saw growing up. But is that something that you come by naturally in terms of interacting with people and keeping engaged? Was it something you learned as a reporter? You got to keep your sources kind of close. Is that something that you've just, sort of continued to cultivate over the years? I mean, where did that really come from, do you think?
Oh, that's a great question. I think it was probably a little bit of everything. It was a little bit of osmosis, right? Because it was so much a part of my family's upbringing and the background I come from, where we did have these gatherings frequently, and my grandmother kept friendships literally for 70 years. She was sort of the center of this group of women that would meet every month for 70 years.
I love that.
um which is so beautiful. Yeah, they had a great relationship. But I think also journalism, right? That you have to be able to connect with people in order to figure out what's going on, and they have to feel comfortable talking to you,
Yeah,
and they have to feel like you're being authentic and not just trying to get information out of them. You have to come at it from a place of compassion or genuine curiosity or interest,
sure.
depending on what the story is. But I think it's probably a combination of all of that. And then the academy gave me an extra feel for how to be around artists and how to make them feel safe, make them feel like they are, in a place that is comfortable, in a place where they'll be looked after, in a place where they won't be harassed for
Yeah,
autographs or things
yeah,
like that, right? And that you're not really just talking to them because they're famous or whatever, but because they're interesting human beings.
yeah,
And I think very often for celebrities in particular, it's hard to find that. It's people talk to them because they're famous or they want
sure.
something or whatever that may be. And it was very easy for me to just be normal around them and see them as people and appreciate their art, but
Yep.
appreciate them as humans.
And like you said, I mean, I think it's so critical to be able to do that, and that's probably true for anybody, right? But at the end of the day, you're trying to make them feel like you are there. There's no ulterior motive. You're there because you want to be there. You're there because you have a genuine curiosity and interest in who they are. And I think one of the things that I think I could tell is definitely your superpower is putting people at ease. I noticed that when you and I got on the phone, even though I think you might have been going down the 405 when we were talking, you were in traffic or whatever, but I felt like we were just like hanging out at a coffee shop, just having this conversation. You definitely have a skill set there. And I think especially when you talk to people that come from, some form of celebrity, everybody is
Mhm.
always trying to get something from them. And so when you
Mhm.
can, shine a light on them and you can, give them the proper due and attention that they deserve. But at the end of the day, it's like, I'm not trying to do it for any other reason other than I'm genuinely here trying to support you, guide you, get to know you as a person. Human that, heart to heart, belly to belly conversation is just so valuable.
I love that belly to belly. That's fantastic. Yes. Yes, 100%. Which you do the same in your podcast.
I try. I don't think I'm as gifted as you, but I've got a lot to learn, and I'm grateful you're in my life. So I'm gonna be a sponge and absorb what I can from you as well. I'm curious. So you spent the 4 years at the academy, and then Amazon MGM came calling, and that was a another shift in direction for the career, huh?
Yeah, so another thing that I like to do is, this is a good and a bad thing. I'm very goal oriented.
Yeah.
It's bad because in a way you don't enjoy the journey. You're always looking for
Next thing.
where's my
Yeah.
goalpost, where
Yep.
and
Yep.
and that isn't great, especially if you're trying to lead a creative life too. Sometimes there is no goal, it's just creating, right? But in the case of work, for me, I've always been like, okay, after 3 years, I start getting antsy. Like the LA Times, I was there for 15 years. And part of the reason I was able to stay so long is because you kept shifting beats, right? Like you start on the cop beat and then you
Yeah.
go on to the county beat and then you go on to business and then entertainment. And so it felt new each time. Um, but for me, after 3 years in one place, I start getting antsy. I start getting a little bored and I start
Yeah.
thinking, okay, what's next? What's next?
Yeah.
What's next? And the academy, it was a natural end for me because we set the goal in 2015 that by 2020 we would reach, all the goals that we had set out, and we reached them. And so I thought, well, I should leave on a high note. Like, I'm very proud of the
Yeah.
work we
Yeah.
did, and I'm ready, and it's been amazing. But what's next? What's the next frontier? And of course, I'd been thinking about that for a couple years before that 2020 date.
Sure.
And the next frontier was, I've never worked at a for-profit company, right? I mean, the LA Times was a for-profit, but it really is a public service to
Sure.
be a
Sure.
journalist. And then the Academy was a nonprofit, a very well-to-do nonprofit, but it was still a
Yeah.
nonprofit. And so I thought, I should try the business side. Like I need to understand how companies work.
Yeah.
And what's the biggest company on earth to try to work for? It would be Amazon.
Yeah.
And so I reached out to a friend who was the head of film at the time, and we had worked together at the academy. And she was like, whenever you want to come here, let's figure out how we can get you here.
Oh,
So that was also very lucky that I was friends with her. She knew my work. She knew how I was able to, put forth a strategy, follow it through, get committees to work together, all of that. So we found a position for me at Amazon, and went through waterboarding to get hired. They have this very strange hiring process where they ask you, it's a whole, I think it's 2 days of
oh,
questions
wow.
with like 6 people on the interview, and
Yeah.
they ask you to memorize the principles. Like the whole thing is very interesting. But it was great to learn all of that. So that's how I got to Amazon.
Uh, and so along this journey, the underlying theme is, connection and relationships, right?
Hmm.
Which I love. I mean, I love the fact that you had someone that you worked with, at the academy that then moves over to Amazon, and then that's an opportunity to leverage that connection to find that career opportunity. What would you say is the most surprising thing when you went from nonprofit to a for-profit business? Was there anything that was just like stands out as, wow, this is not what I expected, or wow, this is better than I expected?
So, Amazon obviously, and I can't speak to any other company, but Amazon really is super clear on its business strategy, right?
Yeah.
And once you understand that, like, they're super clear, there is no confusion, there is no shifting lanes, there's none of that. Then you begin to see, oh, okay, so I need to stay in a lane, and I need to follow the footprint that they're setting in front of me. There's no kind of wavering back and forth.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit rigid.
Yeah.
Um, and for me, it was a little like I like to go all over in a bunch of lanes. And so that can be confusing when you're at a company where people are like, no, this is my lane.
Stay
This
your
is where.
lane. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and they do it on purpose, right? Because
Yeah.
you do have to stay on top of things. Like if you're the head of marketing and you're not doing marketing, but you're doing something else, then the marketing is going to fall through the cracks, right?
Sure. Sure.
So there's reasoning for it. So that was fascinating to see that, to understand that. to see how forward thinking they are in terms of all of their initiatives, their global initiatives. It was fascinating. It was like being inside of this interesting planet
Yeah.
populated by Amazonians, and
Yeah.
they actually have a language that's Amazonian,
Yeah.
and people who are serious about moving up the ranks adopt the language, and they
Sure.
understand all of the norms of the company and the culture of the company. So that was really a wonderful thing to observe.
Well, yeah, and I can imagine that that had to be a fascinating experience because, like you said, I mean, they know what they do and they know what they do well, right? And they stick to
Yeah.
the principles of that. And so that from, because even though technically, I mean, you're now an entrepreneur, we're going to get to that, but being someone that has sort of been accustomed to, like you said, I like to change lanes regularly. That had to be a little bit of a unique experience to figure out, okay, wait, I got to stay right here. And this could get boring pretty quick, maybe, or maybe
Yeah.
be a little, maybe not boring, but restrictive a little bit. I would
Restrictive.
imagine.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I felt constrained,
Yeah.
and it's I'm used to being like, woo, let's go.
Well, so that leads me to my next question. From that time, now you've started Artemis Muse Productions. Okay, so this tell us about this because this is what I wanted. I was so excited. So for my audience, just so you guys are aware, Carol Costello, who has been on the podcast before, and you may know her from her time at CNN. She and I have struck up a friendship, and I was kind of giving her some guidance and advice on something she was working on. And then she sends me this email and she says, "You have to meet my friend. And I think she'd be perfect for the podcast." And it was like, yes, I would. I'm all over that. So, but then when I started reading about what you're starting and what you're doing, that's why I said, we are like two peas in a pod. So tell me about Artemis Muse Productions.
So Artemis Muse, the whole sort of premise behind Artemis Muse is to sit and commune and to be together, right? To build community. And I think I really started thinking about this when I was at the academy. And we had to figure out a way to bring the membership together
Yeah.
because there had been many years where the members didn't feel like there was enough outreach to them. And so my job was to figure out, okay, how do we bring you into the fold? And how do we make sure that you feel comfortable, that you feel a part of this amazing group? And how do we create synergy between all of the different groups with like the actors and the directors and the producers and et cetera? So I began sort of exercising those muscles there. Um,
Which had to
and
be
then
hard, right? Because of the controversy and there's the kind of lack of community. And here you are trying to bridge that community, come bring them together.
Yeah, it was interesting. At first, it was very hard to convince some people that it was safe to come into the water, right? Because they had been members for, some had been members for several years
Yeah.
and, decades even, and they hadn't heard a peep from the academy, and I'll never forget. I went to this lunch with this incredible producer who sadly has passed. But she had been a member, and she was like a legendary producer, married
Oh,
to another legendary producer. She had been a member for, I think it was like 30 years, and she hadn't heard from the academy from anybody to take her
wow.
to lunch.
Oh
And
my.
so that was a moment where I was like, oh my goodness, we really do have to bring back this concept of community and reach out to all of the different factions, right? And the beauty about the academy was that you really were Switzerland. Like, at least I tried to be Switzerland. Like, there were people who were furious at the academy for not
Sure.
reaching out or for having all these issues. And then there were people furious at the academy for wanting to change. And somehow you had to bridge those gaps. And convince both parties that this initiative that we were undergoing was essential for the Academy's future, and that we could all get along like
Yeah.
veteran people who've been in the business a long time should learn from these new folks too, and the new
Yeah.
folks can learn from the veterans, et cetera. So it was very fun to strategize.
Yeah.
Sometimes it was hard, but it was very fun to strategize too.
So that experience was kind of like a boot camp for what you're kind of creating now with your current company, right? So tell us what the premise of that is and where your focus is.
Yes. So I would say the premise is threefold, right? One is to bring back the concept of community live, right? And
Yep.
in person,
Yep.
which we all suffered so much in COVID from the lack of community and the lack of human connection. And I think strangely, it might have taken COVID for us to realize how fundamental it is, right? To
Agreed. Yeah.
have that contact and connection and community when all of our traditional communities seem to be kind of, I don't know, maybe not crumbling, that's a strong word, but they're definitely being challenged, right? With whether it's religious organizations or colleges
Yeah.
or you name it, everything seems to be a little bit polarized right now. So the one-on-one, more intimate gathering thing, I think, is welcome.
Yes.
Um, the second premise is to catalyze groups and individuals around issues or ideas, or art, to discuss, right? And to see, like, what are these, they're called social entrepreneurs, for
Yep.
example, that
Yep.
somebody who just won a prize with the Rockefeller Foundation, say, for inventing, I don't know, a new way to do something incredible, right? You
Sure.
want to hear about that idea, and you want to hear how they're implementing it and how it can impact our world, and what we can do on a local level to forward this, right?
Yep.
We had an event a few weeks ago with our mayor of Los Angeles to talk about preventing homelessness. I mean, as you know, I'm sure the homeless situation in Los Angeles is dire.
Yes.
It's really
Yep.
a crisis, and a lot of these folks are families, and
Yeah.
they're young people coming out of foster care who are not given the tools to be able to get an apartment and get a
Yeah.
job and all of that. So and there are elderly people as well who are getting kicked out of their apartments because the rent is too high.
Yeah.
So what can we do as a community to help mobilize? What resources can we bring to the table, and how can we support the mayor in this specific effort? So that's just an example of one of the topics that was very interesting to me, and I think is helpful for our community.
Yeah.
The third premise is to advance a company's business initiative, right?
Mm.
So you have your C-suite group of eight, I don't know, six, seven, eight people, and you want your company to begin doing things in a different way, or you have an idea that you want to launch, or you have a new direction you want to go. How do you ensure that your team is on board with it, has buy-in into it, is able to sort of do that riff with you as the head of the company to
Yep.
try to get you there? So and also it's a team building exercise, right?
Sure.
Instead of
Sure.
going out and playing golf, or you could do this in addition to playing golf, but you can have dinner with your team in a curated way with the right questions being probed to push forward the agenda that you're setting forth.
I love that because I think, specifically around companies, there's not enough of that actually takes place, right? There's a lot of mandates. There's a lot of this is what we're doing, but there's no consideration for where the other ideas reside within the organization. And I always tell people through the work that I do with Ripple, right, is you have to, it all comes down to people, right? You have to figure out how to engage people. You have to make them feel seen and heard so that they can actually really come to the table for that innovative and creative process. And the great ideas don't just reside at the top. They come from all layers and levels of an organization. And I think that what you're doing to cultivate that, I think, is phenomenal. And what I hear from that is that you're really trying to coalesce those opportunities, whether it be within an organization, whether it be within your community, or some aspect of what your contribution is to the world. Is like, how do I get other people who may have opposing views or different views than I do, but how do we come to the table to have a conversation to actually serve a greater need? Right. And that could be for
100.
profit, or it could be for community, or it could be in some other capacity. But at the end of the day, I mean, we talk about the ultimate ripple, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I mean that's the goal. And imagine, if there were hundreds of us doing this in our communities, how different this
Oh,
world would be.
without question.
One
Ha-
of the things I think Carol and I talked about, and I know you have talked about, is that fundamentally people I think are good, and
yeah,
they're just trying to live their lives. And there's the bad actors are probably maybe 2% in the world, right?
yeah,
Maybe, I
yeah,
don't know. I'm
yeah,
totally making this up, but it feels like if there were more bad actors in the world, it would be a world of chaos
yeah,
everywhere all the
yeah.
time. And I think there's a lot of beauty and a lot of generosity and a lot of creativity and connectivity in the world. We just have to tap that.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that really resonated with what you sent me before we got on to record was it's that attention and that's focus. And it's amazing what the power of just a few committed individuals can do. I think there's this tendency for a lot of people to think, well, what difference can I make? I'm by
Right.
myself. But when you get the power of two, or like your grandmother, the power of 12, I mean, now you're really shaking some stuff up, right?
Right.
And that, to me, and I want to come back to your great aunt, and I want to come back to your grandmother, and how that inspired and maybe informed some of the work that you're doing today. But it just takes two people to really create a movement and create an opportunity to say, we can take something from just conversation and ideation into actual action.
That's right. Yeah. And I think that that's what for me is a really important piece of this business, is that it's not just hearing people talk, right? Like it's not a salon in that sense. It's also action oriented, right?
Yeah,
So at the end of the mayor's event, people wanted to know how they could get involved and help. And we were able to send them, here's a list of the things that you could do, even if it's just you know donating $50, or saying that your own company could help train some of these foster youth so that they can go out and get a job and an apartment, etc. But yeah, I think it's important to give people a sense of ownership and a sense of, I can help. I can make a difference, even if it's in my small world, my world, my immediate world. I can make a difference.
absolutely. I mean, I think to a certain degree, it's showing people that they have agency and control over what their contribution is, right? And sometimes that's financial. And of course, sometimes that's just volunteer. But I think really, in order to create a sustainable movement, you got to get people to think beyond the one activity, right? How do you become an owner in the process, and not just a owner from a decision maker perspective, or I'm going to go create my own movement within my neighborhood or whatever, being an organizer, but really at the end of the day, like, how do I like impact change so that not only can I get my neighbors excited, but the neighborhood over, and get people to say, look, this is a problem, or this is something worth tackling. And when we go and we do it together, not only are we going to learn some things about ourselves, but we're also going to learn about what true community is and what the power of that true community can be.
That's right. And live and in person, right? Because I think we
Exactly.
have this sense, and maybe you and I, our generation, we don't believe this fully because we lived in an analog world, right? We grew up in an analog world,
Yep.
and we saw that you actually had to be with people, like, but the younger generation, like our kids, they really are used to saying they're building community online.
Yeah.
And to me, yes, there's definitely a benefit to building a following and a community online. But do you really know that community? Like,
Right.
well, are you able to, there's something about being able to have a conversation in person and get to know a person over time in real time and in live that is different. And I hope that we can bring that back with more regularity.
I love that. So give my audience an understanding of kind of how you're starting to do that, because I'm really fascinated about this. And maybe even before you go there, maybe share a little bit about your background growing up and what you saw your grandmother and your great aunt do, and how that sort of informs some of your work today.
Sure, sure. So I grew up in a very strong matriarchal family. There were men, of course, there were grandpas and dads and all of that, but the women were very, very prominent in the family.
We knew
And
who ran things.
yeah, they ran everything.
Yeah.
Um, and just super interesting. And so my grandmother had two sisters, and my grandmother was the baby, and she was sort of the bon vivant, pretty, like, very social, like a
Yeah.
social animal. And then there was my middle aunt Nona, who was more sort of a little bit more introverted, but also was just sort of sweet. And um she was just such a generous, beautiful soul. And she had some interesting qualities that you could tell her any word and she would do it backwards. She would say it back to you backwards. Any word. It was when we were kids, we loved doing that with her.
Oh yeah.
And then there was my aunt Toe, who is the oldest, and she was the more serious, like professional, very career oriented person. And she decided not to get married in an era and in a country where it was pretty
Yeah.
unheard of,
Yeah.
for her generation. Um, and instead, she had this amazing job at a bank and had access to people who were, really important movers and shakers in business, but also she was very interested in art. So she collected art, she knew musicians, um, chefs. I mean, she just had the whole gamut of intellectual, artistic, and fun, creative people in her home pretty regularly around her round dining table, which I have now in our home.
Oh,
Uh,
nice.
yeah. And these beautiful conversations would happen, and then people would play music, and it was a very I was too young to really enjoy them. I was barely born,
Yeah.
when she was having them, but my mom and my dad remember them very fondly. And I always thought that's a great idea. That'd be really fun. And then going to her apartment when I got older and I was able to see this magical place full of books and a big piano, a grand piano, because she was also she was a concert pianist.
Wow.
So seeing this piano there and her velvet couches and a chaise long there, like the whole thing was so
Magical, right? I mean, yeah,
aspirational,
yeah,
yeah, and magical for me, when I was growing up. So I think that had a big impact on me. And then, like I said, my grandmother was the I think the core, the backbone of this beautiful group of women who met in this city called Cuernavaca, in outside of Mexico City. And it was really kind of a village. It wasn't even a city at the time when my grandmother lived there with my grandfather. And she started building community, and literally 70 years later the same women would get together every month. They would fight, they would, love each other, they would drink tons of tequila, they
yeah.
would laugh. When my grandfather died when my grandmother was in her, I think, in her 40s. And then she remarried in her late 60s. And her girlfriends, this group of girls, had a bachelorette party where they all dressed like grooms and she dressed like a bride. And they were like almost 70 years old. So they were a very, very fun group of people.
Oh, yeah, I mean, so, I mean, I know you mentioned in, kind of a written summary you sent me about that there was this salon mindset though, like with your grandmother and her friends, and you said what I loved about it was this 12 group of, this group of 12 women that became best friends to one another, and yeah, there's ups and downs, and there's, some always gonna be some drama, right? But at the end of the day, everybody was there for one another, and then your great aunt being in a position to create this collection of very eclectic people that could come together. And the thing that I loved about it when I interpreted the salon mindset in that, the big round table, right, that there's no edges, right? Everybody has a place, everybody's
Exactly.
got, an opportunity to pull up a chair and have that conversation, and everybody's included. There was
Yes.
just something really, without really knowing the background of that story, there's just something really endearing about that. And that,
Yes.
to know that that's sort of what you're doing now in this work that you're doing, and what you've kind of always done with your entire career, is figure out how to make those people feel welcome, to want to have a conversation and engage. What would you say your biggest lessons are from that experience, and how does that inform your work that you're doing through Artemis now?
I think the maybe the biggest lesson is the consistency, that even if you don't feel like putting something together, you have to make the effort. Like
Yep.
you can't just drop the ball,
Yeah,
especially with when it comes to your close community and your friendships, that it takes a lot of work. I don't
it
know if
does.
it's the same in Austin, with time being such a limited resource,
Yep.
sadly. But in Los Angeles, everybody's so busy all the time, right?
Yeah.
And I just don't subscribe to that. I think being busy is important, but you also, in my view, for me at least, I need to make time for my girlfriends
Hmm.
and for me. And so every month I get together with my girlfriends and we make sure that this is happening on a regular basis, and everybody holds each other accountable to do that, because otherwise suddenly 6 months pass and you haven't seen
Yep.
your closest friend. And I mean, that's crazy. That's,
Yeah.
slowing down is also one of the things that I learned from my grandmother. And being in Mexico, that there would be afternoons I would go there in the summer when I was younger, and literally you would just sit on a porch and talk
Yeah.
and watch the birds and
Yep.
the bees, like literally do nothing except talk and hang out or be quiet and be together.
Yeah.
And that always felt really nice to be able to do that. And I think we need to make the time to do that as well.
Absolutely. And like you said, I think, one of the things when you were talking about just the hustle and bustle of our day-to-day lives, right? There's that phrase, you can get busy, living, or get busy dying, right? But that living
Yes.
is through those relationships and through those opportunities to sit down and share those experiences, whether it be a conversation or whether it be just sitting on the porch, watching the birds, but you're there together. It's that presence. And
Yep.
that's what really resonated with me when you were saying, you were really committed to try and bring people back together in live situations. I mean, we all know the adages of the cell phone and social networks and all these different ways, but it's, we're the most connected that we've ever been as a society, and yet there are studies that say we're the most lonely and isolated than we've ever been, right?
Yep.
So how to
Yep.
overcome that, and it's when you overcome that and you get people to come to that table to have that conversation and be together, that's where the great ideas come from. That's where the great conversations and opportunities to really turn, the tide on something, small or big. And that's the opportunity that you create when you bring people together and create that community, that sense of community.
Yeah. Yeah. And the ability to laugh too, right? I'm sure
Yeah,
some,
absolutely.
like, you have to have, I'm sure you've had moments where you're like, "Oh, this is such a bad day and I'm so kind of depressed and sad." And then you call your friend and they make you laugh. Like, I have this girlfriend I've had since we were little kids, and every time I call her, I feel like I can be my silly junior
Yeah.
high school self, and we laugh like idiots and we do stupid things, and like she's the only person I can do that with, right?
Yep.
Who gets it and who gets me, who isn't being judgmental and makes me laugh, and then I hang up the phone or after seeing her in person, and I'm like 100% better.
Days better. Absolutely. It's amazing. It's the best medicine, no
Yeah,
doubt. But
yeah,
I think, and it's even more important, and like you said today, like, for the generation of our kids where they're growing up with different concepts of community and different approaches to it, it's still important and valuable for them to actually experience it and see it, right? And to actually have that. And I think really at the end of the day, you need to go out into the world and find more of those people, and to find those people that really just, they just tick the box for you. They get you, they understand you, they're there to pick you up when you've been knocked down, dust you off and get you back in the game. There's those people that just always have that, snarky comment that just makes you laugh and smile. And then you've got those people who are like, oh my God, I got this problem and I have this issue. I don't know where to start. And they're the ones that be like, all right, let's start here. Let's start, figuring out what we need to do, what the game plan is. I mean, I think that the level of, I mean, I'm almost taking a page from your great aunt, which is, find that diversity of people who bring these different flavors to your life. And it's amazing how much more colorful your life becomes.
yeah, 100%. So much more interesting. And it's a skill though, like you were saying, like you actually do need to first understand that it's there, right? That it's
Yeah. Yep.
possible. But it's also, for us, we have three kids, and for all three, it was like essential, almost like brushing your teeth. We are going to sit at the table at least 3 times a week as a family,
Oh,
and we're
yeah.
going to have conversation. You're going to put your phone away and you're going to look me in the eye and you're going to eat properly and you're going to know how to, hold your fork and
Yep.
just also be able to have a conversation. We're going to talk about the news. We're going to talk about our day. We're going to talk about, I think we used to call it, and this I'm sure a lot of people have used as well. What was your rose and what was your thorn today?
Ooh, I like that.
During,
Yeah.
because it's okay to talk about if you had a shitty day.
Yeah.
Like,
Yep. Yeah.
talk about it. Let's get it
Yep.
out.
Yeah.
Um, and that's also something that I think needs to happen more with kids too. Is that,
Absolutely.
maybe Artemis Muse 2 will evolve to include dinners with with not children, but with middle school
Yeah.
to high school kids, so that you're breaking bread together and you're
Yeah.
getting to know each other and you're talking about what you're going through. And kids are going through a lot now, and so at some point maybe that will be a focus too.
I think that would be great. I mean, it's so needed. And I think it's, one of those things, especially in today's world where a lot of kids don't have that, hey, we're going to have dinner 3 times a week and we're all going to sit there, that because just the nature of the family dynamic may be slightly different, or they just don't have that support resource. I think being able to
Yeah.
teach those skills is so critical. I spoke at an event last fall where they brought in these high schoolers to learn about technology and the possibility of that as a career path as they're starting to make decisions about what's next for them academically, where they might go to school, what kind of career paths that they are choosing or they could choose. And it's amazing how many of them just they don't have that positive influence. When you talk to them,
Mhm.
they don't think beyond their little bubble because they're just trying to survive day to day and try to make it through whatever grade level they're in at this point. They don't think about, well, gosh, college is 2 years away and there's these other opportunities. And so having opportunity to have conversations with people who show genuine interest in playing some role, to just help them learn and navigate the nuances of the world and all the possibilities that are out there. I think it would be so powerful. It would be a great way to, certainly form a direction for the company. Because talk about the ultimate ripple, right? There'd be
Right.
what a way to get that to come full circle and really make a difference.
For the next generations. Yeah. Yeah. And
Absolutely.
and to see that everybody has a gift, right? Everybody has something unique to offer. And sometimes you have to really tap within to see what that is and figure that out. But everybody has something that they can offer,
I
and
I agree. Yeah, I love that. Well, I mean, I could talk to you all day long, and I think we definitely will have to have you come back because there's so much more that we could go through. But I'd love to ask you a few ripple connection questions if you're okay with it. It's just
sure,
questions that are fun to ask that give our audience just a little bit more insight as to who you are as an individual, if you're okay with it.
sure.
Okay, well, this is one that I would love to know. Who is inspiring you right now?
Who is inspiring me right now? I have to say, right now, my husband is a very, very, very big inspiration for me. He is just an incredible human who has given me so much strength and belief in myself. Sometimes we question ourselves, and after being out there and in the workplace, you come home and you're like, oh, I'm so stupid. I'm so this. I'm so that. And he's always like, what are you talking about? No, no, you're not. You're this and this and this. Like his support and his intelligence and his guidance has been so critical for me through our marriage. So he's an inspiration.
That's awesome. I love that. What did the 7-year-old Lorenza want to be when she grew up?
Oh my God, I wanted to be Donna De Verona. Do you remember Donna De
Yeah.
Verona?
Oh, yeah.
So I was a swimmer, like a total swimmerhead,
Yep.
but I always had this thing about journalism, and I thought, well, why not be a swimmer and on television talking about swimming like Donna De
Yep.
Verona? Yeah, and then as I got older, I veered away from the wanting to be talking about sports to doing news itself. But yeah, she was definitely who I wanted to be.
I love that. I love that. Well, I mean, you and I talked about this when we first got together that you'd spent a summer down here in Austin training. Was it
Yes.
always your goal as a swimmer to go for the Olympics, or was it you just wanted to be better in high school, college, or what was the drive and motivation for that for swimming?
Um, I always wanted to be an Olympic athlete, and I was determined to make it to the Olympic Games that year. And I thought, there's no better place to train than at UT with my
Yep.
old coach, Mark Schubert, and
Yeah.
Janet Evans, and like the whole troop of swimmers there. Um, and it really was the actual hardest training of my life. It was so brutal. We partied hard, but we also worked hard.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, it felt like it was the right thing to do at the time.
I love it. What does swimming teach you, or what lasting lesson did you take away from swimming, competitive swimming, that sort of informs where you are today as an entrepreneur?
I think the discipline, like swimming, it was every day except for Sundays, twice a day, and it was about 6 hours of swimming a day,
Wow.
and you couldn't miss a class or a workout because your coach would call in a terrifying voice, say, Muñoz, where are you? And I'd look to my mom and I'd be like, and she would say, you you're the one who needs to decide. Are you going to swim? Are you going to be a swimmer? Are you going to be Olympian? It's up to you. And so I would have to make those decisions, but the discipline was real, and it was not just the swimming and the weightlifting and the running, but also how you looked, your uniforms, um, your mindset, like all of that was very important. I think the visualization that we were taught was really important to set a goal and visualize yourself getting there. Like I said, I'm struggling a little bit now with the goal thing because I want to enjoy the moment too.
Yeah.
But the goal orientation thing is real, and I know manifestation happens. It's happened in my life. Every time I envision and I want to manifest something, it comes to life. So I believe in that. So I think those are the two big takeaways: the discipline and the visualization, mental kind of discipline.
I love it. Well, you can definitely tell you have both. I mean, I love what you're doing. What is the most surprising thing you've learned or experienced becoming an entrepreneur?
The hustle is real, man. You got to be out there hustling all the time and thinking, and you're the CEO, CFO, COO, CMO, like you're everything.
Chief
And
bottle
so,
washer, got to take out the trash, got to do it all, right?
exactly, exactly. Um, so that's been interesting and challenging and fun, and you think, well, it'd be easier to just work for a company and just get paid every 2 weeks. But then you're like, no, I don't want, I want to invest in myself. I want to give this a try and see, I mean, I need to be in several lanes at once. And where else can I do that?
That's awesome. I love that. So, I mean, you obviously grew up with a really amazing family environment, a lot of lessons learned, and there's some legacy there, right? You talked about it with your grandmother and your great aunt. What what do you want your legacy to be? What do you want your three kids to most take away from mom?
Oof, that's a good one. Um, I want them to appreciate the beauty in the world. I want them to see it, appreciate it, enjoy it, not be Pollyanna about
Yeah,
it. Obviously,
yeah,
there's so much hardship and so many terrible things happening in the world, but we have to counterbalance that. And
yeah.
I believe that when you see and enjoy beauty, you spread it. And nothing, I mean, our kids are, in my humble opinion, amazing, all three of them. And so they're already spreading beauty because of who they are.
Sure.
But I think that's what I would want them to live a life of positivity and to just keep pushing and to see beauty and art and appreciation all the time.
I love that. That's a great answer. Um, if you could give one piece of advice to future generations, what would it be?
Mm. Um, I would say try to be kind and considerate to everybody, because that assistant that you may be rude to could end up being your boss, right? Or a boss. Um, they're connecting with human beings on a human level and being respectful, I think, is an important thing to have. Look people in the eye, shake people's hands firmly, come in for a hug when it's welcome. Um, I think that is like the emotional intelligence, right? Of reading a room, of being present with people and of respecting people, I think is an important trait to try to develop
That's excellent. And you said earlier, like, it's not something that you stop doing. You continue to practice it. You keep
every
focusing on
day.
getting
Yeah,
better at it. And I mean, you're exceptional at it. I think I'm okay at it, but it's always a process of trying to continually get better to do
yeah,
it. And when you do it, it's funny how the world just rises up to kind of meet you, right?
totally. It's so interesting. You're right. Yeah. And having that imposter syndrome is something that
It's
we
a
all
real
have to
thing.
combat, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
we all have to fight that and realize I deserve to be in this room. Why? why am I not deserving of that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Well, my last two questions is, what does the ripple effect mean to you? When you hear that term, the ripple effect, what does it mean to you?
I think it means that your actions reverberate, right? Whether they're good or bad, that your actions, your intentions could be one thing, but I think your actions reverberate. And so if you understand that principle or you believe in that principle, then why not just spread as much positivity as possible and spread as much goodwill as possible and see how it makes a difference. It really does. It makes a difference in people's lives to feel seen and heard and welcomed and embraced. It really makes a difference.
I love that. That's excellent. One of the best answers I've gotten so far. I love that.
Oh,
What ripple can I be looking to create for you?
oh my gosh, Steve, you already are by having me on your podcast. Thank you. And,
Ah,
this is so wonderful to get to know you and to be on your podcast. And I so appreciate what you're doing and spreading the good word and spreading ideas and giving people a chance to talk about the good work that they're doing and what they believe in. I think is wonderful and so essential in this day of polarization.
well, thank you. I appreciate that. But if there's ever a way that I can do anything for you, you're Hollywood connected. I don't know that I could do anything for you, but if I could, you are someone that I really, I, I, I hope that we can continue to stay in contact. You might be stuck with me as a friend now. That's just the bottom line. But if I can
I would
ever
love
create any,
that.
yeah, if I can create anything, do anything for you, I'd be happy to do it. Before I let you go, what's the best way for people to learn about your work? And I'm going to include what you sent me as our show notes, but how would you like people to reach out to you, learn about the Artemis, or follow you on social, whatever what's the best way to go about that?
So the my website is thelorenzamunoz.com. My Instagram is the Lorenza Munoz. And my email is thelorenzamunoz@gmail.com. So people can reach out to me in either of those areas. And yeah, I'd be so happy to hear people's stories and to see, where they want to make connection and how they would love to be a part of this.
Excellent. Well, we will definitely include those links as well. And I just want to say thank you so much for the time. Thank you for your willingness to come on the podcast. We both owe Carol a debt of gratitude for connecting us,
Yes.
and I can't
Yes.
wait to see what kind of ripples we might create together. So I really appreciate you and everything that you're doing and what you're doing to contribute and create these positive movements out there in the world. I can't wait to see where you go next, and hopefully maybe be a part of it in some capacity. So thank you.
Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely, Steve. That would
I
be
love
so
it, guys. We'll be back with another episode of the Ripple Effect podcast very soon. But until then, Lorenza, ripple on.